This is the Clean Energy Show with Brian Stockton and James Whittingham.
Hello and welcome to episode 32 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. Welcome to the show. It is a show where we discuss the week in clean energy news. We have fun doing it, don't we, Brian? Am I wrong?
It's so much fun.
Okay, because we're fun people, and we like to have fun, and we hope you do too, so thanks for joining us. We're also on the YouTube as a trial experiment, so if you want to check us out on YouTube, we do the first half hour of the show up on YouTube, and yeah, it's going great. People are watching.
Yeah, here's my problem, though. I'm not sure how to sit in my chair for the YouTube, because I've got kind of a terrible chair. I don't know, like I'm just not sure what looks good on camera.
You've got a chair built for radio. So
yeah.
So coming up on the show, Brian, we've got China is going carbon neutral by 2060. That is huge news. We're going to get into that again. And I rebuke the Premier of Alberta, Jason Kenney, by lighting one of his own unicorn farts under his ass. That's what I'm going to be doing later. I'm going to be rebutting. What's wrong with me today? I've not had a stroke, I swear to God. But we will be checking my blood pressure later, especially during that segment. And we'll do a survey of the reaction to Battery Day from the experts. As we've said, we're not experts, we're commentary people. You know, we're the people who go on after the football game and talk about it, but really don't know anything about it.
I'm the play-by-play, and you're the color commentary.
At best. Maybe the statistician. So we're going to debut. Are you sitting down? Yes, I can see you're sitting down, because we are socially distancing, and we're going over Skype. James's TV Corner.
Oh, wow.
Now, don't feel threatened. I know it's normally Brian's TV Corner. Don't feel threatened. It's okay. It's probably a one-off, maybe once a year, twice a year, something like that. So, Mr. Brian Stockton, did you listen to that hideous debate last night? I'm just curious.
No, I don't know why anybody subjects themselves to that. It's possible to be an informed voter and still just avoid that stuff like the plague. I don't know why anybody watches that.
Have you read the aftermath of it?
Well, I was on Twitter last night, and so you sort of get that third-hand like without clicking on any links or anything.
Without having too much stress. Without cringing or feeling uncomfortable.
Just reading the Twitter was stressful enough, so I stopped.
Well, I wasn't going to watch it. I was doing the Twitter, which I quite enjoy. It's a good way to watch a debate in the States. But my son was downstairs, and it's his birthday today. Happy birthday. He wanted me to come down and watch it with him because he's so naive. He's young. He's 17 now today, and he thinks politics is interesting. It'll be fun. And this is a guy I can't show like a teen comedy to because he cringes too much at the poo jokes or whatever, the sex or the awkward sexual dynamic between people. He has to leave the room practically and come back. So anyway, Trump had this to say.
And I'm okay with electric cars, too. I think I'm all for electric cars. I've given big incentives for electric cars. But what they've done in California is just crazy.
Right. So did you hear about his little mention of electric cars?
Right, which is not a thing that he's done, and he's done the opposite. That seems to be his strategy, to do something and then say the opposite.
He did show up at Lordstown Motors, and I think he might have been at Rivian once, just to show the prowess of American manufacturing. So, most people probably didn't hear about those things, but they probably heard about this. And, Elon was actually pretty anti-lockdown, so he's kind of siding with Trump on that. I think that it's good to have it out there that he supports electric cars, because 43% of America is a large chunk of people, unfortunately and very frighteningly, but at least they've had that message last night.
Okay, as well as how great white supremacists are.
Okay, one of those messages was much more damaging than the other one was positive. Yeah, I don't even know why I mention it, but we don't do politics on the show. But we call this our political show because
it's not even our country. It's not our country.
It's not our. We care. I'll tell you why I care, Brian. I'll tell you why I care. Because I think if it went authoritarian, the first thing they do is take over Canada for our meat, juicy resources, our attractive people, and all that sort of stuff. Maybe some of our horses and cows. And I'm moving to New Zealand. Why New Zealand? I think it's the only country that's actually functional. Doesn't seem to have a huge, anti-anything movement.
No, New Zealand is great, home of filmmaker Peter Jackson and
Taikiki Wakiki, or whatever his name is. What's his name?
Taika Waititi. Yeah, one of the great film directors of today.
Yes.
But I don't have the story in front of me, but fresh water is going to be maybe a rare commodity in the sort of climate change future. So, Canada, we're known for having tons of fresh water. So, with future political turmoil, maybe Canada will be the next superpower because of all of our fresh water.
The future, we tried to show you how great the future is because technology and the cost curves are going to fix a lot of things, in our view. We're going to cover that transition over the next 10 years. However, yeah, some things are frightening as to water and sort of the climate in general. But we will talk about that a bit more later. I wanted to talk about my TV broke.
Oh,
this isn't James's TV corner, but it could be. I bought a TV 2.5 years ago at Costco, a Haier, which is an odd brand name. I know. I trusted Costco. And I went around with my bug zapper, those electric bug zappers.
Like a handheld one?
Yeah, I was trying to get a fly.
Okay.
And I sort of just tapped it on my speaker, which wasn't directly connected. I mean, it wasn't directly connected to the TV, but it's about this far away. And I must have created some sort of surge. So we fit the TV, a 65-inch flat screen, into the Prius. It fit nicely with a couple of inches to spare. We took it to the only repair shop in town in our small city. And the guy is hard to communicate with. He's not terribly, he makes promises he doesn't keep. And I've had a microwave fixed there and it worked out okay. But they phoned back 8 days later and said, we can't fix it. Sorry, we can't get the parts. And I said, really? He said, yeah, let me check my email. No, we can't fix it. So I lost $600 of a TV for 2.5 years. And of course, I missed the TV. I've been using the projector, which is wearing it down. It's got a lot of hours capable on it, but I don't like using the projector. It's just weird to watch the news on the projector. You got to heat the thing up and wait a few seconds, and it's daylight, and we don't have a dark room. So we went and bought another TV, and I bought the warranty for $60, which I thought was good because it's actually 5 years for $60.
This sounds like the first world problem segment.
I know, and we don't have an intro for that. I apologize. We should have the first world problem segment, but that's my week. And frankly, I'm exhausted. We should wipe up the show right now. So, Brian, Elon Musk was on New York Times podcast the other day. Did you hear that?
I heard little snippets on mostly other YouTube channels, yeah.
Well, here's a snippet for you.
It was Musk's day to unveil his plans to change the energy equation drastically via innovations in battery technology. It's not easy, said Musk, which is why he was really agitated at the press and investors who dinged him for not showing off an actual battery at the event.
And boy, was he agitated during this interview. He was so ornery. I almost put it into the Elon Musk cray or nay segment. He was just annoyed. And this was a couple days after Battery Day.
Yeah, it's probably unwarranted because, the stock is still near all-time highs, so it doesn't seem like he has a lot to complain about. But some of the mainstream reporting of Battery Day was extremely disappointing. Like it's like whatever it was, a 90-minute, 2-hour presentation, and they just kind of dismissed it all because there wasn't one little nugget that they could grasp onto. So there was a couple of really, really bad mainstream news reports about it.
The press coverage of this event was sad. Most of the press takeaway was a sad reflection of their understanding, really.
All right, so explain it for them then.
I'll try.
Okay.
But I'm also not trying to convince people that much. The results will speak for themselves. We have produced the cells we're talking about. We've produced many of them. Mm-hmm. We have had cars driving with those cells since May.
Yeah, they actually have made the cells. And, it's actually, I don't know why I got this and other people didn't, but you start adding up the 16% here and 46% there. And there are some of the main YouTubers who cover Tesla and what we do, who have countless followers and make a living doing this, expected, like I heard one guy say, I expected a car to go 2,000 miles or something, or 1,000 miles. I was disappointed. Some people just don't get it, even if they're immersed in this. batteries are hard, or we would be flying to the moon on them right now because we've been trying for decades.
And in the presentation, they didn't connect absolutely all of the dots. They sort of left a lot of things up as kind of separate pieces of information. So this is lighter, this goes longer. So if you kind of do the math yourself, they laid out a plan to become really the largest company in the world, if they can pull off everything that they said in Battery Day. So, that should be everybody's takeaway. But, they never declared that exactly. And it probably would have been better to have one of those cars that they have the batteries in actually, drive out on the stage or something like that. But these are all nitpicky things. Like it's a battery investor day, and they couldn't have done a better job of really laying out what they're doing in the roadmap.
And they did this with autopilot or full self-driving day too, right?
Yeah, when they had their autonomy investor day like a year ago or something. And yeah, there was similar reaction in the press and in the stock market to that. But just, I think, because maybe this is the first big presentation since the stock has gone sky high, maybe people had this idea that, okay, now the mainstream press gets it, or the mainstream investor media gets it, and clearly they don't.
Well, Musk had this to say about sort of the overall future.
Gavin Newsom just declared that he was going to have California banning the sale of new gas-powered cars.
No, I think these are all indications that the end of the fossil fuel vehicle is nigh. Like the end is not far. So I think it's quite an optimistic message, really.
So yeah, that's my summary of this event is you're done fossil fuels. Like this is it. I mean, there is trillions of dollars going into battery investment around the world, okay? And I'm hoping that other companies have a breakthrough in, say, solid state in the next 5 years or something like that. I mean, there's one bus company that claims it's putting solid state batteries into its buses, I think in Europe. I'll get back to you next week. So something like that is encouraging. I don't know how well they work or if the energy density is up there, but battery, Tesla itself has a big battery breakthrough that will change the world, and people. It's too hard to. This affects everything. It affects wind and solar, everything you can imagine. Trucks, buses, becomes cheaper. They go longer. They have less weight. Therefore, they go even longer because they have less weight. It's exciting, and So I want to get into ARK Invest. You're familiar with ARK Invest, the people who've been bullish on Tesla and have sort of looked at the big long-term picture and the implications of self-driving and the technology and how far ahead they were saying that Tesla's ahead by 3 or 4 years, and has pushed them even further ahead, which is kind of bad for the legacy auto companies, don't you think? Because we need to sort of pull for them to catch up too.
Yeah, we need everybody on board, and we could be all slowed down in this transition by the legacy auto because they're just sort of. It would take too long for, like Rivian is maybe the sort of next biggest startup that's kind of similar to Tesla, but they're still years away from ramping up. So, we need everybody on the same page here.
All right, Brian. I'm going to play a clip from ARK. They were on some business shows talking about it.
So the biggest story has to be Tesla's reducing costs by a dramatic amount. So they're planning to reduce battery costs by over 50% on a $1 per kilowatt hour basis. Their new changes are also increasing the range of the cars by 50%. And then finally, on an investment basis, they're reducing investment costs by about 70%. So, this is really dramatic cost reductions, of course.
Yeah, well, the factory footprint was like 10% going from wet electrodes on the batteries. I mean, that just means you can expand battery production with little investment, a lot less investment. All that's very important. And I'm not a factory tycoon genius, but it doesn't take one to know that is a big deal when you look at the graphical comparison of what it takes to make batteries now to what Tesla will be doing with dry electrodes.
Yeah, and Battery Day, they just addressed so many different things, and all of those things make, a reduction in cost and an increase in power. And so, yeah, it's still a little bit baffling, but because they didn't absolutely connect all the dots, I guess that's what people missed.
And the stock went down. Sadly.
Yeah.
Here's what they had to say about that, though.
So I think it could be that investors are, seeing that 3-year time horizon. Maybe they're looking for something more immediate. And we think that you have to be a long-term investor when you're looking at disruptive innovation. Because if you're not, you're going to miss these inflection points. You're going to miss that exponential growth. To be upset about a 3-year timeline when they're announcing this amazing 50% cost reduction, to me seems a little silly.
It's a little bit silly, but, so much of the stock market is not controlled by you and me. It's controlled by fund managers who are trading, billions of dollars worth of stocks every day. So that kind of makes sense. Like there was no immediate return possible. Like these were all long-term goals. So if you're a fund manager who has, quarterly deadlines to make, yearly deadlines to make, they're going to dump the stock and get in at a different time when there's maybe something more immediate on the horizon.
You seem like a financial expert, Brian.
I only play one on YouTube.
Okay. One question I had about all this was they talked about recycling, right? You remember that? Mm-hmm. And I found it very interesting. Like I know that people are talking about recycling batteries and you can recycle 99%, quite a bit. But then they started talking about making the battery unit part of the car and not having modules in it to save weight. And in doing so, to make it structurally hard, you had to put an epoxy in between the void where the batteries. And I thought, well, how can you do that? And Monroe here, Sandy Monroe talks about, he actually knows, which impressed me because I thought he just knew cars. He actually knows recycling too, how they do that.
There are many companies working on that currently. Most of them are going to use a chilling process. So you take the structural adhesive and the battery pack and whatnot, and you drop it into liquid nitrogen. You crush it. You make sure that there's an inert gas over the top of everything so that nothing can catch on fire. You grind it all up into small pieces, and then it goes into weirs and several different other different batches for separating the elements. And ultimately, you wind up with lithium here, nickel there, and all the other, and cobalt in another one. So it's not the easiest thing in the world, but it's a whole lot easier and better than digging up thousands of square miles to try and extract the ingredients needed for making lithium-ion batteries.
So the future will have less extraction, and we'll just recycle things because it's cheaper. What do you think? Let's move on. What do you want to talk about this week? What's your big stories of the week?
Well, I did want to mention California. You mentioned off the top of the show, just because that it seems like old news now, but it came out sort of while we were recording last week. So
yeah,
the news is a week old now, but it's still quite huge. This is a mainstream story. California banning the sale of new internal combustion cars by 2035. It may come sooner than that. I mean, who knows if there'll be any combustion cars for sale after, say, 2030 when our podcast wraps up.
Yeah.
But this is a big deal and maybe a surprise to, similar announcements have been made, I think, mostly in Europe. But that's big news.
And Canada for 2040.
And in Canada as well.
And you remember when they said Canada, our local government said, no, we can't culturally or geographically handle that or climately because it's too cold for electric cars. They hadn't even begun to look into it. And those bans at other places of the world haven't seemed to have any traction in the media and the conversation here. But of course, we've been following that. And that's why, how can you be bullish on oil? And we'll get that in a second with Jason Kenney, the premier of Alberta, where the oil sands are. But this got a lot of traction in the media.
Yeah, and to bring it back to Canada, too, the other thing I wanted to mention was Walmart has increased their order of the Tesla Semi to 130 trucks. So this got some traction in the U.S., even though it's Walmart Canada. It is a large enough order to kind of...
but Brian, I thought electric vehicles don't work in Canada in the cold.
It's a cultural thing, James.
A lot of things are a cultural thing these days, which is bothering me, isn't it? But
Yeah.
you know what this says to me, though? This says to me that the people who are buying these trucks get to see them. They get to see the test results because they've been driving them around for 2 years now, or is it 3 even? They get to see the results. They get more confidence. They have more inside information than we do. And by the way, a lot of the reasons that Battery Day didn't wow people is they couldn't say, well, this battery is going to make the Model 3 worth $34,000 instead of $40,000, and it's going to make it go 25% further. They can't say that because it's a whole Osborne effect. Nobody's going to go buy a Tesla if they tell you exactly what's coming. So a lot of that, they had to keep their cards to themselves. And I think that this is an indication that Walmart knows something that maybe we don't. So it's a very encouraging thing. And by the way, Walmart is going to become all EVs by 2028, which is not 2035, Gavin Newsom in California. It's 2028. So it's encouraging. I've always been a bit disappointed by Walmart, though, because they had this potential to put solar panels on the roof, and they didn't really do that too much. But that potential was there, and they use a lot of electricity. So were you disappointed in that?
Yeah, well, they're one of the biggest companies in the world, so, they can, the choices they make are huge.
All right. So Jason Kenney, we had a throw-in speech in Canada. If you're not from Canada, throw-in speech is from the parliamentary system where they sort of lay out a broad plan of what the government's going to do in the next session of government parliament, right? Am I accurate there, Brian Stockton?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, for once, I'm accurate. Okay. So Kenney is the premier, the governor, you will, of the state or province. It's a province, wants to be a state. And Jason Kenney has got it all wrong. In reaction to the throne speech, Mr. Kenney said that the government should have mentioned Alberta. And what he's implying is that he should be bailing out the struggling oil and gas industry. This is the industry that's been around for 100 years and can't survive on its own, which pisses me off. Because they get against green initiatives, which has just been around for 20 years, barely 20 years. And we don't need green sort of money thrown in by government so much anymore because it's competitive on its own. So Kenney said that it was a fantasy plan with the federal government. I'm not a supporter of the federal government. I'm not a supporter of that party. They're not great enough for me, but they said that it's a fantasy plan for a mythical country. So his whole ideology is that, did you hear that? The whole, the sort of language he uses, that this is all crazy, unicorn farts and such. He said, what do they expect airplanes to run on unicorn farts? And let me just address that, Mr. Stockton. Airplanes will not run on unicorn farts, as we said last week, but it's only like 2% of the oil industry. Like airplanes is a very small single-digit percentage of oil consumption. So if we solved everything else, which can run on electricity, and we know that, it's just a matter of scaling things up and time, then we would still be fine. And then the oil is going to be very cheap. And guess what? Alberta oil is not cheap. It is the most expensive oil in the world, especially the tar sands and some of its other oil. And, of course, there is a company in Vancouver which has seaplanes flying on electricity already. They've retrofitted planes, and they're going to continue to do that. Of course, Airbus recently announced 3 prototypes. Did you see that? They're green hydrogen for 2035.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues with airplanes I was reading about recently is, some of the toughest regulations in the world have to do with the airplane industry because, safety is obviously very important. We don't want planes falling out of the sky. So, just from a regulation standpoint, it's going to take a long time, even if the technology is there. Those hydrogen planes are quite far out in the future, but it's certainly possible. Why not?
Well, he talks about this oil demand going up for decades because
He actually said that?
Yes, he did. And his people are following him, and they're all going to go into the welfare because of it. If you don't get what's going on, you can't plan for the future, and make it not as bad as it's going to be. And it's going to be terrible if our governments say that. So in India, he says, not everybody in India is going to be driving a Tesla in 2035. Because he was asked about the California ban. He said, well, not everybody in India is going to be driving Teslas in 2035. That's fantasy thinking. He said, if you really think the billion people in India who desperately want to move to a higher standard of living are all going to be driving Teslas 15 years from now, then you're disconnected from reality. That is to say, there are billions of people around the world living in extreme energy poverty. They don't have the luxury of repeating all those California-style pieties. They want to stop burning cow dung. Of course, that's a racist slam, and he should be slapped with a banana for that until he bleeds, because I really think he's an idiot. There, I said it. Jason Kenney is an idiot. He's the one living in a fantasy land, Brian Stockton.
Do you have your blood pressure monitor on, James?
No, but it is standing by. It's mere inches away, and the batteries are charged. But yes, I'm upset because we know, everyone knows, if you pick up a newspaper, you know that even India tried to ban ICE vehicles by 2030. They moved that back, but they are planning on doing it. Why? Because their air is incredibly polluted. So bad, you can't even breathe indoors sometimes. And Teslas are not the only electric vehicle out there. There are dozens, including some being made in India. So in India, you're going to have, there's a $5,000 EV we talked about last week in China. Actually, we didn't talk about it, but there's a $5,000 EV from General Motors. It was like $4,200 after incentives. It's a tiny little thing, but I mean, if you are in poverty, you can drive that, right? And not make any emissions at all, and get around and be happy, and not need any oil changes and things like that. So there's 21 countries doing this. They're all banning it. EVs going down. The cost curve is going down. Gas cars will be the Tesla of his fantasies. If Indian people will not be able to afford gas cars if they're poor. If it's true what he says and they are poor, they will not be able to afford gas cars because gas cars will be more expensive. I'm James Whittingham.
Yeah, we're only about 3 years away from that absolute inflection point of electric cars being cheaper. And then, they're already maybe technically cheaper if you include like maintenance and fueling costs now. But in 3 years, absolutely for sure. And then so we've already probably hit peak oil because of the pandemic, the price of oil. And it's all downhill from here. It seems fairly obvious.
It is. And I'm not, doing a dance on the graves of the people who are going to be losing their livelihoods. But I really think that it's more about wealth than jobs, that a lot of people got rich off of oil and they want to stay rich. Brian, the China news is perhaps the biggest news of perhaps the year even.
And this came out, I think, just before we recorded last week, right? Wasn't that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we should probably talk about that some more, but China announcing that they're going completely carbon neutral by 2060. This is amazing.
So China's President Xi Jinping, how do you say his name?
I have no idea.
President Xi. I just call him Xi. Announced during the United Nations General Assembly on 22 September that we aim to have CO2 emissions peak before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. So 2060 is not sort of the sweet 2050 targets, but the thing is that they are going to ramp up very quickly. That it's just they will meet most of their targets by 2050, but at least they're being realistic about it. And they're saying, well, the last few percent maybe we won't get to by 2050 because it's just our population's exploding, or more or less our middle class is exploding, and the demand is going up so much.
No, and what was the stat? Like just this announcement alone should shave off 0.3 degrees Celsius. Was that? Do you remember that statistic?
It's there's nothing more significant than a point of Celsius of global warming that one announcement can make. I mean, that's unheard of. It's never happened before.
Yeah. So if things are going up, a couple of degrees Celsius, this should take care of 0.3 just on its own.
Which is huge for the survival of our children and our children's children. It is the world's largest carbon emitter, accounting for 28.6% of global emissions. And its primary sources of emissions are power and heat production, industry, and transport. So power generation, easiest one to solve, thank you. And yes, they are going to build more nuclear there. I don't know why, because it's kind of more expensive. I mean, my thing of base load is like battery is going to make a really good base load when they become cheap enough. And it seems like China is going to be at the forefront of making cheap batteries too. So the industrial sector peaked emissions in 2012 and have been declining thanks to a combination of recycling, energy efficiency, and switching coal to gas. And the electricity and heat production, as well as transport sectors, have yet to reach peak emissions, so those are going up. But to reach carbon neutrality, China will have to accelerate deployment of existing technologies, such as EVs and solar. So sell your oil stocks, Brian Stockton, sell them. Just get rid of them, okay? Just dump them.
I'll think about it.
Okay. He doesn't have oil stocks. I kid. We do a lot of kidding on the show. So, yeah, they're going to increase all that, and in 2019, it seems like there's going to be huge reductions by even 2025. Between 2019 and 2025, there's like a quarter of the emissions that they're talking about reducing just in a few years. And by 2030, the same thing continues. And then by 2050, it's only 62% and 84% in 2060. And then they'll have to offset some of that by some other ways. But I think everybody's, no matter how aggressive your climate plan is, don't really take into account the full measure of how cheap and available and useful our current technologies are, and their cost declines, and the battery as a backup for green energy.
Yeah, we just need a huge mobilization. So that was at the UN that China made that announcement?
Yes, they had little video reports from their leaders, and Trump was on there first, slamming China for its carbon, and then the President Xi, as I say, came on and said this. So it's a big deal.
And then noted hippie Boris Johnson also said some pro-green things. The UK could be the Saudi Arabia of wind power. That's what Boris Johnson said at the UN.
Yeah, sure. Anybody could. Almost anybody. We've said that before about where we live. We have abundant resources in everything, geothermal, solar, and wind. So
the difference is the UK doesn't necessarily have the oil and gas reserves that we have. So
yes.
It makes more sense maybe for them to be a bit more aggressive on that.
Noted hippie Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
Brian, it's time, if you'll allow me, for James's TV Corner. Are you ready?
I'm not ready. This has come as too much of a shock.
James's TV Corner, like Brian's TV Corner, but better.
Made a little intro for us. It's too hard to buy, people doing voiceovers, so I had to use a computer. So I've been watching Apple TV. I've been watching The Long Way Up. Have you heard about The Long Way Up?
Yeah, this is Ewan McGregor's motorcycle travel show.
Yes. They've done two other things, like 10 years ago and beyond. Have you watched any of it? No, I haven't. Brian, I really like it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very compelling viewing. I mean, they've done this before over two different continents, right? So they're going to go from the tip of Chile all the way up to Los Angeles, but they're going to do it on electric bikes. And now here's the deal. Their support vehicles that they have for a production like this are also electric. They're electric Rivian trucks. And in both cases, so they had two Rivian trucks that are electric, which aren't on the market yet. They're just starting to ramp up the factory to make them. And the Harleys, I believe, are in the market. Is that correct? The Harley Davidson LiveWire?
Just coming out, yeah.
Is an expensive bike. So this is like 2 years ago. And I saw some things on Twitter. A lot of electric vehicle people were sharing this. But the thing about this is these prototypes were just slapped together with seconds to spare for this show. There was no testing or anything, and they put them out in the middle of nowhere. And if you don't know, South America's electrical system is really piss poor compared to North America's. So what Rivian did is they put chargers. They partnered with one of the home charger companies to put level 2 chargers in various places throughout the whole stinking route between the tip of South America And we're talking not too long because the range is not great on these motorcycles. Like and they start in a winter, by the way, which like bad winter, cold, snow, low range, and things. Yeah, it's riveting for if you're an electrical vehicle fan. I've been watching it on a projector because I had to, and the scenery is just freaking stunning. Like, it's just stunning scenery, and it's just very compelling. And they stop in little towns and talk to people. And of course, the culture there is to welcome people into your home and make them dinner and tell them stories. And everybody knows everybody, and they're piss poor. There is one point where they tried to get gas because one of them, the only ICE vehicle they have is a gas-powered motorcycle, and it ran out of gas, and they couldn't get gas for it. So they went to the gas station, and the gas station only gets gas like once a month, and there was a lineup miles long to get the gas. Whereas they were actually doing better with their prototype electric vehicles when a crappy power grid that sometimes didn't work than the gas people were, because the gas people had to spend their whole day there getting gas, their whole stinking day. So they actually gave a gas can to somebody who was filling up his car and his gas cans and did it. But anyway, here's a bit of the trailer.
We'll ride 13,000 miles from the southern tip of Argentina all the way to Los Angeles.
150 miles every day is a long way to go.
And if that wasn't enough of a challenge, we wanted to see if we could do it on electric motorcycles.
I think it's the future electric.
You'd be the first people to go this distance charging as you go.
Oh my God, it's so great, isn't it?
They love the motorcycles, okay? They don't like the range. The range was a struggle at first, and because they couldn't rely on charging, they had to charge for level 2 overnight or sit somewhere for 5 hours and get a few kilometers in order to meet their goal. A lot of that's cut out because it's just kind of monotonous, but yeah, it's very compelling, and it reminded me of the Who Killed the Electric Car movies and the Revenge of the Electric Car. It seemed like this was marking a significant change in the world, that this was the precipice of some big final push for electrification. And of course, the electric motorcycles are quiet. So you're on these completely barren, beautiful coastal roads, which are stunning. And the engineering for some of the bridges and things is amazing, but there's no one around. Nobody's driving around and cruising because there's just not a lot of wealth. And it's just quiet, and you can hear things. You can hear the birds. You can hear all these things. And these are motorcycle heads who have spent their lives on motorcycles, and they love the product. They love the torque and the and sometimes they broke down. Things broke down. The Rivian broke down. They fixed it. The Rivian has this weird this switches. They look like something at a nuclear power plant. These big lit up switches that you push, and because they didn't have all the things finished, they just had this big, MacGyvered box where push to start, push to stop. And but yeah, it was very compelling. I know you have Apple TV, so you watch it and give us a review later.
Yeah, no, I'm surprised they had not only the Harley Davidsons, but the Rivians. I had no idea. That's really wild.
Yeah, I saw a few people posting little video clips of the Rivian, and I was amazed at that. And I was wondering when I was going to happen. It was 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago, just this time of year, because this is when winter was sort of wrapping up down there, but it was a particularly bad winter. So this has been James's TV Corner.
James's TV Corner, like Brian's TV Corner, but better.
Brian, I've hogged too much of the show. Why don't you go back? What else do you got this week?
You've taken me by surprise here. Now I've got to go quickly through the Volkswagen ID4. That was the other thing I wanted to talk about. This is their second major electric vehicle, the ID3, which is already for sale in Europe. But the ID4 is more the one that's being targeted for North America because the ID3 is a bit too small maybe, and they'll have limited supply, so they're focusing on Europe. So it's still not out or anything, but they have sold out the first edition of it. It's coming out with the sort of the more expensive one first, and that edition is already sold out. Yeah, it's just interesting that it's coming, and it looks like a decent car at a decent price, and will be coming eventually to North America and eventually to Canada. I think I have where's my story here for...
Do they have a Canadian price?
Yeah, mid 2021 for Canada.
The ID3, which is, it's a hatchback, right? It's like their version of the Leaf, which they're not going to sell here, but they are going to sell the ID4. Didn't they just this morning drop the price by $3,000 to be more competitive?
That was the Mustang Mach-E.
Oh, the Mustang Mach-E did that. Yeah, because of
that just came out. Yeah.
So yeah, we have competition here in the small SUV EV market. We have the Mustang Mach-E, which looks very compelling, although no one has driven it yet. They've driven in it, but not driven it. It looks good, and it's got a good brand behind it for the general population getting interested in it. So yeah, there seems to be a lot of competition, don't you think?
Yeah. So, but so mid 2021 for Canada. I mean, they're all still coming too slowly, and everyone's still waiting for that. They had that amazing VW bus, electric bus. If it's mid 2021 for the ID4, I don't know how many years away the bus is. So it's going too slow, but I am very excited about VW and their offerings seem pretty compelling.
Yeah, and they're the best, their best hope other than Tesla, and we need more than Tesla. A lot of the Tesla fanboys will say, no, Tesla, they're going to make everyone bankrupt. That's not going to fix our problem. We need other people, and Elon has said this many, many times, we need everyone else. And he said it in that interview that I talked about too, that we need everyone else to be on board. So,
no, and there's a good chance Tesla will be the leaders in terms of features and price and everything, but there's always room in the market for shitty cars too. Like there's always been shitty cars.
Yeah.
So
more shitty cars.
It's like right now there's car companies that probably should be out of business because their cars are not that good. Companies like Toyota have the reputation for, good cars and reliability. But I think there's room in the marketplace for, many different levels of, and sure, yeah, some of these players, they're not going to maybe live up to what Tesla's going to do, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to just go bankrupt and go away.
So, Brian, I've got some feedback that I wanted to talk to you about because Rod from Vancouver on Twitter was asking us about what sort of EV can he buy in an apartment. And he says that if you live in an apartment, I live in Vancouver, okay? He says, I could lobby my employer, which I suggested. He's not sure about that. I live close to a Petro-Canada charger, which is the charging network of gas station network across Canada. There's one in Regina, one along the Trans-Canada Highway. Is that correct? Or is it expanding beyond that north too? Is it? Or no?
Not yet, but yeah, Petro-Canada's got the Trans-Canada covered, and also Co-op appears to be putting in their own chargers. We didn't talk about that as well, but
I think that's big news.
I'm sure
that's
there'll
a
be
local
more
story, right?
Yeah, but
I'd like to get some more information
on
that. If anyone's listening, and you can get us some more information on the Co-op, because that's sort of a rural farm agricultural country businesses that are getting into that.
Yeah, the last time I was Tesla supercharging in Whitewood, Saskatchewan, the Co-op and it's at the Co-op station.
Really?
The Co-op charger was under construction.
Well, that was going to be one hell of a gas station.
It's
in the middle of nowhere. It's sort of an intersection, and it's going to have charging for both. You could go buy a Kona, Brian. You could get to the lake that way and buy a Kona.
No, and I think their Petro-Canada nearby has the Petro-Canada charger.
Really?
Yeah.
So are you telling me there's going to be 3 chargers in that little town?
Yeah, well, it makes sense. It's a big country. It's, it's just one of those way stations along the way.
I'm still surprised. I'm still amazed. Anyway, and he says that there's another charger that is a City of Vancouver charger that's more difficult to get to. What would you suggest to this man who's listening to our show, as he should be, and getting inspired by this?
Yeah, well, Vancouver has a unique problem because, of course, it's one of the warmest places in Canada. So they don't typically have electrical outlets in their parking spots. Like here in the prairies, you put up an apartment building, particularly if it's got outside parking, every single one of those has an electrical outlet because we have to plug in our block heaters for our cars in the winter. But yes, so much of the parking infrastructure in a place like Vancouver just is not wired for electricity. I think there are programs in place, like they're starting to figure that out, and the government in BC knows that, okay, we're going to have to start electrifying our parkades. So I think there has been some movement on that. Tesla's always the obvious answer because they have currently the best charging infrastructure where you could own a Tesla, live in an apartment, and then just charge it at the supercharger. But yeah, it would be better to have a plug-in at home or one at work. Sometimes you can lobby, depends on your building, but you could lobby whoever owns the apartment building or the condo to try and start wiring for power.
I keep forgetting that the rest of the world doesn't plug in their ICE vehicles. I went to California, as I've said a million times, a couple of years ago, and I had 3 people ask me about the plug coming out the front of my car. And they said, is that an electric car? Because it's a funny-looking Prius. And I said, no, that's a block heater. I said, I come from Canada.
Yeah.
We have to plug them in the wintertime just to keep them to start.
And they said, what's a block heater?
So it went on and on. And then we started talking about how great Trump was, and it's a long story. But, Vancouver would be that warm coastal climate where they don't have plugs. So if in Regina, and where we live, in the prairies, where it gets down to minus 30, minus 40, you would have plugs at work just so that your workers can start their car at the end of the day. And that sort of infrastructure would be there, but they wouldn't have that in Vancouver. So, but mind you, Vancouver is a lot more progressive than we are. So I know that when they build new condos, they have to wire and put in charging stalls for new condos and new apartment buildings there. But we really need more. We need incentives for people like Rod's workplace to put in a charger for him. We need incentive for his apartment building to put one in for him. All this takes money, and it is a bit of a burden on both of those places. We need to get that going, though.
It'll definitely happen. There's also like the Flow charging network. I think is that owned by the BC government or something.
Yeah.
But BC has this wonderful advantage of having pretty much all of their electricity come from hydroelectric. So they have plentiful electricity, and it's already zero carbon or low carbon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's cheap. They've got the cheapest electricity prices, I believe, in Canada, which may be even the cheapest electricity prices in the world. I'm not sure.
We won't quote you on that, but you think so.
No, don't.
Okay. Yeah. Is there any other stories, Brian, this week before we get to the much-loved lightning round?
Go ahead. Let's do it.
Really? You're ready for the lightning round?
The Clean Energy Show lightning round.
It's a big one this week, Brian. This is the skill testing question round where I ask you I throw headlines at you from the clean energy stories of the week. You can answer the questions or you get the buzzer. I've also installed a dinger this week if you get something right. So there will be one skill testing question thrown in. Plug-in hybrids and EVs cost less to maintain and repair, finds Consumer Reports. Did you read that?
No, EVs I knew about, but they're saying even plug-in hybrids?
Plug-in hybrids and EVs cost less to maintain and repair, finds Consumer Reports.
Yeah, well, I was always a bit nervous about buying something like a plug-in hybrid because you've got the whole electric powertrain and then the whole gas powertrain. That always makes me a bit nervous in terms of maintenance. But I guess if you're mostly using the electric, which a lot of people would be, even that is a way better alternative.
The only thing that you really save is your brakes because you don't have to... your engine is not going to have any wear on it if it never runs, but you use your brakes less because you have regenerative braking, but you still have to change that oil, on a time basis. Even if it's never used, you still have to change the oil. Well, Brian, Lordstown released their EV pickup truck, and Trump seemed to endorse them. Did you see that one?
I've heard of them, but that's about it. Lordstown, no, I've heard of them, but...
Okay, well, they've got a compelling pickup truck. This is an EV startup, and they are starting to Trump was there. He was there at the factory. Okay, moving on. Tesla to make 2 new different electric cars at Giga Berlin and Shanghai, Elon Musk says. And Trump claims support for electric cars and takes credit for the Obama EV tax credit, which he did last night. I didn't mention that, but he did. And he also claimed that he gave big incentives to electric cars, by the way. So all lies, but he's big on Lordstown, the trucks. He's big on the trucks.
Yeah, and of course, so there was several questions in there, but Tesla at Battery Day, they outlined a plan to make a $25,000 small car, and what he sort of clarified later on Twitter is likely in China, it would be one car, and then in Berlin, it might be a different one. So we're going to get slightly different cars around the world, it sounds like.
Okay, Brian, what is the capital of New York State?
Albany? Yay! I'm surprised I knew that.
I'm surprised I didn't, because I thought it was Syracuse.
Okay.
Alexa, what's the capital of New York State?
New York State's capital city is Albany.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to give you the buzzer, and I thought, no, he's right. Albany. It is Albany. That's how that went down. Very dramatic in my head. A lot of things are dramatic in my head. Now, this is not your area of expertise here, but the VW ID4, which we just talked about, will have a towing capacity of 2,200 pounds, and I'm disappointed in that. A good towing capacity, say, for the Model X is 5,000 pounds, which you can tow a lot of trailers. I need probably 3,500 or 3,500 pounds just to tow a pop-up trailer with bikes and everything, and, the pack to the limit to have everything in there. It was 2,700 pounds for the all-wheel drive. The Audi e-tron is 4,000 pounds. Are you disappointed, Brian Stockton, in the wimpy towing capacity of the VW ID4?
No, because I don't know anything about towing and I don't care.
Okay, you got a point for that one. It's not wrong that you don't care. Okay, a new cooling technology protects against severe heat and viral spread.
What? What does that mean?
They have a new cooling technology. You're not clearly reading all the blogs, Brian. There's new technology which is you can leave the windows open, and it's a series of tubes, basically a wall of little tubes of air, and they've been testing this outside in Asia somewhere. I can't remember where. Singapore, I think. And you just walk inside, it's 90 degrees out, and you just feel cool. And it doesn't use as much energy to cool the place, and you can have fresh air, like you don't have to worry about viruses as much. And it just sort of, it's like a radiator that sucks heat away from you rather than a radiator that radiates heat towards you. That's the best I can explain. Anyway, you didn't see that, so you got the buzzer as far as I'm concerned. Honda unveils a new SUV concept that is sleek. Did you see it?
I think I saw it, but I don't have a lot of interest in concept vehicles.
No, I know, but they drove it around and the wheels articulated. And there was glass doors and it was all kinds of crazy. Daimler unveils electric bus with 441 kilowatt solid-state battery. I mentioned this earlier. It is 25% improvement of energy density over the current lithium-ion batteries, which is not small. But maybe not as great as sort of a 50 or 60% improvement we were hoping for with solid-state batteries. It has a 220 kilometer range. And I found this interesting. It has 170 kilometer range in the winter with the heater on, which isn't bad because, a lot of us take like a 50%, 40% hit. That's pretty minor for the big, you got a big, wasted space of cabin. It's not as efficient as far as volume of air and everything. You have a big open area. So I was pretty impressed by that. And so these guys are electrifying all of their big trucks as well. So anything they make, like a garbage truck, a recycling truck, tractor, for plowing the streets, and refrigerated trucks, all going electric. Another thing that Jason Kenney should probably pick up a newspaper and read. Sorry, there's the blood pressure again. All right, what do you think of the... Oh, no. Okay, I made a mistake. The Honda SUV concept was not what I was talking about. What do you think of the Mercedes-Benz prototype of the future? That's the one with the glass doors and articulating wheels, the Mercedes-Benz. That thing was... Electric covered it because it was so bizarre, even though it's a prototype.
Okay, yeah, I did see quickly the footage of that, and it was interesting, it was cool. But again, it's a far-off concept, so I didn't really pay attention.
You know what? That's what I think about that. Yeah, pay attention. And the last story of the week was the Walmart Canada triples Tesla semi-order from 130 trucks to 20% EVs by 2022. 2022, that's a year from now, Brian. 20% EV trucks by 2022. I guess Tesla better get off their ass and do that. And it's 100% by 2028.
And you were saying that often people like big companies like that have pre-ordered, they probably have a bit more of inside information. So you're telling me that they will have some of these by a year from now? Is that what you're saying?
That's what they're saying. That's what they're saying. I don't know. I hope so. They'll probably get started again. There's other people who make electric trucks, though. Remember, they've got orders from other people. There's other people who make electric trucks, including China's BYD. So we'll see.
That's true, yeah.
Brian, that wraps up the show for this week. It was a long one. We are approaching the hour mark, but it was a dandy show, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. We will be around, and we have lots of places to contact us.
The Clean Energy Show wants to hear from you. Join us on Twitter at Clean Energy Pod, by email cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, and by online voicemail speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for video clips of the podcast, reviews, and full audio episode archives.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Rate us on Apple, iTunes. See you next week, Brian Stockton.
Yeah, see you next week.